Story 1. The neighbors next door. 3 years ago, my partner and I bought our first home. It wasn't extravagant. No marble floors reflecting sunlight, no imported stone countertops or designer fixtures. Just a modest, comfortable house tucked into a quiet neighborhood where people waved when you walked by and children rode bikes in slow circles at dusk. The kind of place where you felt safe leaving your curtains open at night, where the loudest sound after 9 p.m. was usually a dishwasher running, where nothing ever really happened, and for a while, life was good. 18 months later, our next door neighbors, an older, friendly couple, announced they were moving closer to their grandchildren. Their house was bigger than ours. It had a private driveway, a garage, a garden twice the size of ours. Even a deep soaking bathtub. My partner fell in love with the second we toured it. It wasn't luxury, but it was an upgrade. We didn't hesitate. We bought it. And we put our original house, the one directly next door, up for sale. Looking back, that decision feels like the moment everything shifted, like nudging the first domino without realizing how many were lined up behind it. We received several letters from potential buyers, young families, couples expecting their first child, retirees wanting to downsize. We chose a Polish couple. They seemed polite, quiet, slightly reserved in that way people are when they're trying to make a good impression. They smiled often but never fully relaxed. Even during the signing, there was a tension in the air, subtle but noticeable. The husband asked detailed questions about the plumbing system, the heating setup, insulation. The wife mostly observed. They spoke English with us, fluent enough, but even when my partner switched to Dutch, gently, casually, they responded in English again. I assumed maybe they weren't confident in Dutch yet. That wasn't strange. Plenty of people prefer English when they're still learning. We handed over the keys, they thanked us, and that should have been the end of it. For the first week, nothing unusual happened. Then came the first crack. It started small, a random Tuesday night, just after midnight, a loud bang. I remember sitting upright in bed, heart hammering, trying to process what I'd heard. It wasn't the kind of accidental thud you ignore. It sounded violent, like a heavy object being thrown against a wall. Then another bang, then silence. I looked at my partner. He looked back at me. We waited. Nothing. The next morning, everything appeared normal. Their curtains were drawn, no visible damage, no police cars. We brushed it off. Maybe they were rearranging furniture. Maybe something fell, but then it happened again, 2 nights later. This time it wasn't just banging. Music exploded through the walls, not just loud, aggressive. Bass pounding hard enough to vibrate the glass in our cabinets. It went on for 20 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it began. For days afterward, silence. Just enough to make you question whether it even happened. That pattern continued for weeks. Violent noise. Then nothing. It never lasted long enough to justify a complaint. Never consistent enough to predict. Just enough to keep us slightly uneasy. And unease is strange. It grows quietly, like mold behind walls. Then came the car. One afternoon, the husband pulled into the driveway, and both sides of his vehicle were destroyed. Not scratched, destroyed. The metal along both doors was crushed and scraped from front to back. Paint stripped away in long, jagged streaks. The kind of damage that doesn't happen at low speed. My partner walked over to check on him. What happened? He laughed nervously. A concrete pole on one side and a trailer turned too wide on the other. The explanation didn't add up. You don't scrape both sides of a car in separate minor incidents and end up with damage that's symmetrical. But what were we supposed to say? We nodded. We chose to believe him. We wanted normal. Normal is comfortable. Normal doesn't keep you awake at night, but something in my gut shifted that day, a quiet warning, The break-in happened the following week. It was early evening, around 6:00 p.m. Still light outside. My phone rang. It was him. He sounded breathless. "There are people outside my house," he whispered. "They're turning my security cameras away. Please check. Please call the police." The fear in his voice sounded real. We ran to the front window. 2 men stood at his door, not knocking, forcing it. One kicked near the handle while the other shielded his face from the doorbell camera. We called the police immediately. My heart was pounding so hard it felt difficult to breathe. The men got inside within seconds. We couldn't see what was happening after that. It took the police 20 minutes to arrive. 20 minutes feels like a lifetime when you're watching a crime unfold next door. By the time sirens echoed down the street, the men were gone. Moments later, the wife came racing down the road, abandoning her car in the middle of the street and sprinting inside, screaming for their small French bulldog. Police lights painted the houses red and blue. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Everything felt surreal. But here's what didn't make sense. While walking my dog later that night, I saw something strange. 3 streets away, the husband was parking his car. Calmly, no panic, no rush, he got out and walked back toward our street at a normal pace, as if arriving at the scene for the first time. At the time, I told myself I must have misunderstood. Maybe he'd been somewhere else. Maybe shock affects people differently. But later that night, we reviewed our doorbell footage. Before the break-in, one of the burglars had stood outside, casually talking. They were speaking Polish. I don't speak Polish, but my partner's colleague does. The next day, we asked him to listen. The men had been discussing which house to target, ours or theirs. Then they chose theirs. Nothing was stolen. Not a single item. Police never caught anyone. I told the officer it felt staged. He wrote something in his notebook. We never heard back. After that, the air changed. It felt heavier, like the neighborhood had developed a pulse. And it wasn't steady. About a week later, I was at a housewarming party across town. My phone buzzed. A text from my partner. The music next door is insanely loud again. I sighed, then my phone rang. His voice wasn't annoyed. It was strained. The car just drove through our garden. For a second, I didn't process the words. What? The neighbor's car? It smashed through our front garden and into their own front door. My stomach dropped. He started talking quickly. 2 men were loading electronics into the vehicle. Large flat screen TV. Professional audio equipment. Expensive looking gear that didn't fit the story of a random burglary. And I recognized the description immediately. The same 2 men from the break-in. This time, the police arrived in 7 minutes. 7 minutes that felt like 7 hours. Officers cornered the vehicle before it could reverse out of the destroyed entrance. They demanded identification. The driver looked at the officer calmly and claimed to be our neighbor. Using his full name, there was one problem. In 9 months, our neighbor had never spoken Dutch, not once. This man spoke fluent Dutch with a thick Polish accent. The officers exchanged a look. They knew something was wrong. The men panicked, the engine roared, and suddenly our peaceful street erupted into chaos. Tires screeched. Sirens wailed. The chase tore through quiet suburban roads where children normally played hopscotch. It ended 3 streets away, police vehicles boxing them in. They were arrested, but that wasn't the end. There was still movement inside the house. Officers went back in and dragged out a 3rd suspect, while one officer stood inside our home documenting the destruction to our garden. Torn grass, broken stone, tire tracks carved into soil. Our doorbell rang. We all turned, and there he was, the real neighbor, standing on our porch. And that's where everything truly began. This next story started in 2017, in the suburbs of Montreal, Canada. I was 15 years old. and I didn't understand yet that sometimes your house watches you back. We had just moved into a split-level home tucked into a quiet suburban street where nothing ever seemed to happen. The lawns were trimmed, the mailboxes stood straight, cars were parked neatly in driveways every evening like clockwork. It felt safe, predictable. My bedroom was on the lower level, not quite basement, not quite main floor. Half underground, half exposed, one wall connected directly to the garage. The opposite wall had a wide window overlooking the backyard. The blinds were cheap vertical plastic panels. Several were missing. Even when fully closed, there were narrow gaps, thin slits of darkness that never completely sealed the room from the outside. And directly across from that window, my closet with sliding mirrored doors, which meant no matter how I lay in bed on my back, my side, facing the wall, I could always see the window reflected behind me. At the time, I thought that was kind of cool. Now I understand it meant I was never not facing the glass. It started about a year after we moved in. Late nights, I couldn't sleep, so I watched YouTube on my tablet with the window cracked open for air. One night, sometime after midnight, I heard shuffling outside, soft, measured, like someone trying not to be heard. I paused my video, the sound stopped, complete silence. I told myself it had been part of what I was watching. I pressed play again, the shuffling returned, closer this time. My heart began to thud in my ears. I turned my head toward the window. Nothing, just darkness between the blinds. I swallowed and forced myself to relax. You're imagining it. You've been watching too many horror videos. I rolled over to face my closet instead and picked up my tablet. And that's when I saw it. Movement at the window, but not directly, through the mirror. A subtle shifting shape behind the vertical gaps. Like someone leaning slightly, adjusting their stance, watching. The blood drained from my body. I didn't scream. I didn't think. I ran upstairs and woke my parents. My dad grabbed a flashlight and went outside immediately. He searched the yard, checked every corner, looked behind the shed. Nothing. He examined the side gate. It squeaked loudly when opened. It hadn't moved. He checked our security camera footage. No one entering the backyard. He came back inside and told me we lived in a safe neighborhood. That I was overthinking, that it was probably wind, or shadows, or my imagination filling in gaps, and I believed him. Because believing him meant I could sleep, but the sounds didn't stop. Every few weeks, sometimes months, I'd hear it again. Footsteps in the grass, breathing, movement just outside my window, always after 11 p.m., never earlier. And never during winter. When snow blanketed the yard, the noises disappeared completely. For months, nothing. And my fear slowly faded until spring. It always came back in mid-spring, the first warm nights when windows cracked open again. When snow melted and lawns were soft. I didn't notice that pattern until years later. One night, against every instinct screaming at me not to, I decided to look. Not directly. I couldn't force myself to face the window. Instead, I stared at the mirror, and in the reflection, I saw the silhouette of a person. Still, standing inches from the glass, watching, I bolted upstairs again. My dad checked. Again, nothing. And once again, I convinced myself it had to be my mind, because the alternative was worse, much worse. The pattern continued for years. I changed my behavior. I went to bed earlier, played videos louder, started wearing headphones, avoided looking at the mirror at night, never stared directly at the glass, because part of me was terrified of confirming what I already suspected. Then came December 2021. A massive windstorm tore through the neighborhood. Branches snapped, garbage bins rolled down streets around 11:30 p.m. I was on Discord with my boyfriend and went upstairs to grab water. My parents were in the living room, which was strange. They never stayed up that late. Their faces were tense, focused like they were waiting for something. I asked what was wrong. They brushed it off. Then red and blue lights flashed across the walls. A police car pulling into our driveway. My parents stood immediately. They rushed me to my room and told me they'd call me if needed. 2 minutes later, they did. This time, they didn't shield me. About 15 minutes earlier, during the storm, my dad had stepped into the backyard to check for damage. While scanning the yard, he noticed something illuminated by my bedroom light. A man, standing motionless, right outside my window, staring in, not crouched, not hiding, just standing there. My dad yelled and ran toward him. The man didn't panic, didn't stumble. He turned smoothly, jumped the fence in one motion, like he'd done it before, and disappeared into neighboring yards. In that moment, every sound I had dismissed for years stopped being paranoia. It became proof he had been there all along. Police increased patrols. We installed more cameras. My parents knocked on our back neighbor's door to warn her. She didn't open it. Instead, she yelled through the door that she'd call the cops if they didn't leave. That reaction stuck with me. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't concern. It was anger. Defensive. Did she know him? Had she seen him too? Or did she think my dad had been the one sneaking around backyards? To this day, I don't know. I switched rooms after that. Mine faces the street now, but I never look at windows the same way, because once you realize someone has been watching you, you never truly feel unobserved again. And if you think that's where this ends, it isn't. Because sometimes the danger isn't outside the house. Sometimes it's already inside. I was 15 again when we moved to suburban Alberta. Bigger house. Cheaper price, not the best neighborhood, but enough space for our growing family. My dad renovated the basement himself. New carpet, reinforced beams, fixed bathroom plumbing. It became my room. For the first few months, everything felt normal. Then came my dad's birthday. We went out to dinner, came home, and the front door was wide open, unlocked. Swinging slightly, cold air drifting inside. My mom panicked. My dad grabbed a heavy wrench from the truck and went inside alone. Police arrived shortly after. Nothing stolen, but things were moved. Specifically, the books on my bookshelf in the basement. Not scattered, rearranged like someone had browsed them. After that night, I started hearing noises. Inside the walls, under the floor, soft thuds, scraping. I blamed pipes, old house, settling beams. Until 2 a.m. one night, I was under my blankets playing my Nintendo DS silently. That's when I heard it. Laughter, clear, male, right beside my bed, inside the wall, not echoing, not distant, close enough that I felt it vibrate through the drywall. I froze, didn't breathe, waited. 30 minutes passed, nothing else. I convinced myself exhaustion can make you hear things. But the sounds never truly stopped. Weeks later, my baby sister was born. She shared the basement room with me. My parents used baby monitors, one in the living room, one in the kitchen. One night, they went out for dinner. I was home alone with her. I went upstairs for a snack. That's when I heard it through the monitor. Heavy footsteps in the basement, slow, measured. My sister started crying, and then I heard it. A faint SHH, followed by a crash. I didn't think. I ran upstairs and grabbed my dad's rifle from his closet. It was locked. No ammunition. But whoever was down there didn't know that. I decided if I had to, I'd use it as a blunt weapon. All I cared about was my sister. I opened the basement door slowly, walked down, no one visible. She was crying hysterically. The baby monitor was knocked over. I yelled, "I'm armed. Come out before I find you." Silence. I grabbed her, ran upstairs, blocked the basement door with a chair. Called my parents. Police arrived before they did. They searched every room, cleared the house. Then my dad asked something strange. "Did you check behind the bookshelf?" In my room, the bookshelf was built into the wall. The officer and my dad went downstairs. They found it slightly ajar, like a hidden door. Behind it, a maintenance space. The basement window inside was wide open. My desk chair positioned under it. Inside the hidden room, food wrappers, a missing cup from our kitchen, lotion, a switchblade, and a partially eaten apple, still fresh. Someone had been living inside our house. Watching, the police believed he slipped out through the window while they were outside speaking to us. But days later, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the hidden room again, and that's when I found it. A tiny drilled hole in the wall, perfectly positioned. I leaned down, looked through. It pointed directly at my bed. My dresser, my life. Whoever hid in that space had watched me sleep, change clothes, play games, talk on the phone, exist. I'm an adult now. I live in my own apartment. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still feel it. That sensation of being observed. People are afraid of ghosts, of monsters, of shadows in the dark. But the scariest stories aren't supernatural. They're about someone standing outside your window, someone hiding behind your wall, someone learning your routine, and the worst part, they don't need to break in. They just need you to doubt yourself long enough. So if you enjoyed this story, check your locks, check your walls, and maybe don't ignore the noises tonight.